Okay, let's jump right in. I want you to picture this. It's March 2025. Really delicate peace talks for the war in Ukraine. They've just started up again in Saudi Arabia. The entire world is watching, right? But the key to any deal, well, it might not be in Riyadh or Kyiv. It's probably in Washington, D.C.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. With so many different interests, so many people pushing and pulling, who really has the president's ear on this? It is a super complex web of influence, so, let's untangle it together, piece by piece.
So let's start at the very center of it all, that innermost circle of influence, the president's own hand-picked team. These are the folks who have been specifically tasked with making this big policy shift on Ukraine happen.
And just look at the team itself. You've got Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, a retired general who really gets the president's thinking. He's the special envoy. Then you have Secretary of State Marco Rubio running point on negotiations, and Steve Witkoff, a real dealmaker, as the Middle East envoy. And the big takeaway here is absolutely crucial. This is not a team built to manage a forever war. This is a team built to find a deal.
This slide, right here, shows you the absolute core of that strategic change. The whole philosophy has shifted, right? We've moved from the old promise of support for as long as it takes to a much more focused, and you could say urgent, question. What will it take to end this?
And as Dr. Sarah Mitchell over at the Atlantic Council puts it, just changing that one question has massive, massive policy implications. It signals a real move away from a blank check towards a balance sheet. It's all about finding a clear, achievable end to the conflict.
Okay, so let's move out to the next circle of influence, because this is where it starts to get even more complicated. Congress and the American voters. Foreign policy is never made in a vacuum, especially when we're talking about billions and billions of taxpayer dollars.
Even people who are strong supporters of Ukraine aid, like Representative Alexandra Torres, they're admitting that the political winds have really shifted. That once solid bipartisan agreement, it's starting to crack. And just keeping the support for these huge aid packages is becoming a genuine challenge.
And then on the other side, you get this incredibly blunt statement from then-Senator J.D. Vance, who, by the way, is now the vice president. So this isn't some fringe opinion anymore. This is a view that now sits at the very top of government, and it reflects this growing skepticism you see in the Republican Party.
So what's behind all this? Well, if you look at what voters are saying, it's complicated. They do think Russia needs to be stopped, but at the same time, they want a clear plan. They want accountability for the money, and they want to see a balance with all the pressing needs we have here at home. The key thing to understand is, in the public's mind, these aren't contradictions, and the White House has to figure out how to navigate all of it.
All right, next up, we have to follow the money. A really powerful circle of influence comes from all the economic engines tied to this conflict, what you could call the business of war, and now, more and more, the business of peace.
And to really get a sense of the scale here, just look at this number, $113 billion. That is how much aid the U.S. has approved since 2022. A number that big doesn't just fund a war, it creates its own economic gravity, and it pulls in some very powerful players.
And here's how that gravity turns into real influence. It's a pretty straightforward model, actually. Defense companies build their weapons systems in really strategic congressional districts, which of course creates thousands of American jobs. That gives them direct access to lawmakers, who now see defense spending as both a national security issue and a local jobs program. And just like that, the industry helps shape the entire conversation in Washington.
But here's the reality check, and it's a critical one, from retired General James Reynolds. The issue isn't that these companies make a profit. That's what businesses are supposed to do. The real question is whether their recommendations, what weapons are needed, what's possible on the battlefield, if those recommendations always line up with what's best for the country as a whole.
And here's a fascinating twist in the story. As these peace talks start looking more serious, a whole new voice is starting to get louder. You have companies like Bechtel who are looking at a potential multi-hundred-billion-dollar reconstruction job down the road, and they're starting to lobby. Their interest isn't in more fighting, it's in creating long-term stability so they can protect those future investments.
Okay, for our final piece of the puzzle, let's zoom all the way out to the widest circle of influence, America's international allies and the really dedicated advocacy groups right here at home.
At the exact same time all this is happening in the US, you've got this really interesting shift going on in Europe. As American political support starts to feel less like a sure thing, you see allies like the UK and Germany really stepping up, pouring billions in new aid. They're not just waiting for Washington to take the lead anymore.
To put it simply, our allies are hedging their bets. They are actively preparing for a future where American leadership might not be there for them. And here's the paradox. That very preparation gives them more leverage in Washington, because now they can credibly say, fine, we'll go our own way.
And then there's the voice you absolutely cannot ignore, the grassroots. The Ukrainian-American community offers something that intelligence reports just can't. They provide these raw, first-hand accounts from the actual conflict zone. Their influence comes from their credibility, from that direct, personal connection to the people living through this war. And that gives them a really unique and respected voice with policymakers.
So this is what it all comes down to. The president is sitting right in the middle of this storm of influence. You've got the generals, the diplomats, the defense contractors, the voters, the allies, the advocates. Everybody has a stake, and the ultimate job is to somehow synthesize all these competing and often conflicting pressures into one single coherent American strategy. Which, of course, brings us right back to where we started. In a capital city just filled with so many voices, some whispering, some shouting, all of them trying to persuade, which one is actually going to cut through all that noise? The answer to that question won't just decide the fate of Ukraine. It's going to define America's role in the world for years, maybe even decades to come.